Welcome to another Fenestration Canada podcast.
This is Tech Talks, live conversations about the regulatory environment with Jaugelis.
We're now live for this new Tech Talks. So something a little bit different this time. We now have Terry Adamson, our new technical director, who's going to be today's host. So without further ado, Terry, up to you.
Thanks, Stefan. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a great panel session that we're going to deliver to you today. We're going to be talking about the joint Fenestration Canada and City of Vancouver bulletin with respect to their 2022 U values for fenestration products. So late last year, City of Vancouver announced that new, more stringent U values for fenestration products for buildings of 1 to 3 stories will be coming in 2022 building bylaw, Vancouver building bylaw. So while that new bylaw has not yet been published, the city staff engaged Fenestration Canada to prepare a bulletin summarizing the new requirements to help fenestration product manufacturers prepare for the changes that will be in effect on building permits issued after January 1, 2022. So this bulletin will be of interest to many businesses within and outside of BC that supply windows, doors, and skylights into the Vancouver market. Pleased to have the opportunity to help the city staff communicate this message to the industry. So today I've got with me Chris Higgins, the Senior Green Building Planner for the City of Vancouver. Hey, Chris. And we have Brandon Clevenger. He's the Climate and Emissions Engineer with the City of Vancouver. A new face to most of us. We're really happy to see Brandon joining and working in this part of the City of Vancouver's regulations. We have Adrian Edge, Product Representative with Innotech Windows. Adrian is also the FenCan BC Regional Committee Chair. Happy to have Adrian here. And Kyle Cartwright. Kyle's the Technical Manager with Westeck Windows and Doors. And I have to bet that that's a really difficult job, Kyle. That, I'm pretty sure that that's a tough job to do. And of course, Jaugelis, the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Fenestration Canada. And the first thing that I wanted to do was point out, as Steph said, this is the first Tech Talks delivered and hosted by myself. But I don't want you guys to worry. Al's not going anywhere. We're just giving him a bit of a break because there's a lot of activity going on right now with preparing for Regional Week, as well as some papers that Al's been working on. So don't panic. Mine isn't the face that you're going to see all the time. Al will be back doing his Tech Talks very, very soon. We're working on the schedule right now. So we're going to start this off with a presentation from Brandon and Chris on the work that Vancouver's doing and leading the country really when it comes to more energy efficient buildings and what that means to the fenestration product supply. So Chris, Brandon, take it away.
Great, I believe everybody should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Clevenger, and I work with the City of Vancouver as a climate and emissions inspector. My position is relatively new and is focused on process improvement, industry engagement, and development of training programs and seminars to assist industry with achieving compliance to the upcoming code changes prescribed by the city to combat climate change. We wanted to present today on upcoming changes associated with VBL 2022 for Part 9 low-rise buildings. For the purposes of today's discussion, we will focus on changes related to fenestration. Thermal efficiency improvements associated with opaque assemblies or code changes associated with emission reductions are not part of today's discussion. However, we will be hosting webinars related to these topics and would encourage anyone who's interested in hearing more about those changes to attend. Within VBL 2022, there are 3 main pathways to achieve energy compliance to Part 10 for low-rise residential buildings. Depending on the path chosen, compliance is achieved in different ways. The prescriptive path specifies minimum or maximum performance values for envelope assemblies, mechanical appliances, and building air tightness. If all components meet or are better than the code prescribed values, then the building is deemed to comply with the energy efficiency intent of Part 10. An energy model is required for documentation within this path, but it does not need to meet overall performance targets for compliance. The next path is the performance path, and it's achieved by meeting overall energy demand and energy use targets and is verified by energy modeling. If the energy model meets or is better than energy demand and performance targets within the code, the building is deemed to comply with the energy efficiency intent. The final path, which is the passive house path, is achieved if the building is modeled and constructed to meet specific energy targets per the passive house standard, and compliance is granted if the project achieves passive house certification. For today, we're really just going to focus on the prescriptive and performance path, but I will mention passive house a couple of times. When comparing the various pathways, the prescriptive path is the most straightforward approach to achieve compliance to Part 10. A builder just needs to ensure assembly components meet the minimum requirements outlined within the code. This pathway does not allow trade-offs between components. For example, within the prescriptive path, a builder cannot trade off the thermal gains associated with installing high-performing triple gaze windows to offset thermal losses from a lower-performing roof. Compared to the prescriptive path, the performance path is more stringent with regards to overall energy efficiency of the building, and energy modeling is required to validate that the structure meets certain performance targets. However, individual components such as roof R values or window U values are relaxed when compared to the prescriptive path. In this case, the builder could trade off thermal gains associated with installing high-performing triple gaze windows to offset losses from a lower-performing roof assembly, provided that the building meets performance targets overall. And there's still minimums within that, but it does allow a little bit of trade-off. Finally, the most stringent path, of course, would be the passive house path, which has its own design considerations. Looking specifically within Part 10, the performance path utilizes essentially the same performance metrics as the previous iteration of the code. However, for VBVL 2022, the prescriptive path has been updated to reflect improved thermal performance of windows at a U value of 1.22. For large homes or those with high window to wall ratios, the thermal performance is improved again to 1.04 as an average, with no individual opening worse than 1.22. Within the prescriptive path, there are 3 U-value compliance pathways available for fenestration products to assist with various supply scenarios. The first fenestration pathway is to meet prescriptive requirements, simply relies on affixed product labels that verify each individual component has a compliant U-value at its standard size. The second fenestration pathway is intended for projects with U-values simulated at NFRC standard sizes and requires area weighting calculations to be done. Under this option, standard size U-values from test and simulation reports from accredited labs may be used for unlabeled products for the area weighting calculations. The U-value report and with area weighting calculations must be submitted by a registered professional underneath this pathway. The final fenestration pathway is intended for products that cannot demonstrate compliance by labels or laboratory testing and simulation reports. This would include products such as site glazed windows or doors or imported assemblies that have not been tested in Canada. In this scenario, qualified professionals perform simulations for each individual product per an FRC 100 and submit that information to verify compliance. For most products and for most situations, the compliance is going to go through Path A, but there are Path B and C are alternatives depending on the product supply. And if there's any questions related to this, we can open the board now for that.
And I'm happy to just mention 2 pieces, maybe if it works, period, before we take questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Great. The first piece I'll just mention to reiterate from Brandon's presentation is I think most projects will continue to take the prescriptive path. Today in Vancouver, the prescriptive path is the only option that we have. Right now, U1.44 is the worst performing window that you can install as a labeled product. And we're moving to U1.22. So for most projects, you moving to supplying 1.22 windows is going to be the big shift that we're going to see. There will be 2 other scenarios. One will be a highly glazed home where they have to demonstrate a U value, an average U value of 1.04 or lower. And then the other scenario will be projects that take the performance path. And in that case, a window as low performing as 1.44, so the same as today, will still be allowed. So the window could be labeled 1.44 or below it with the performance path. But I just wanted to highlight most projects will be looking to find windows that are U1.22 or better. Yeah, so we're happy to take questions, but I did want to sort of outline that there are many options, but I think most projects will be seeking windows that are U1.22 or better.
Right. Okay. We do have a question. Dave Goldsmith from Plygem, Cornerstone, I guess it is, Dave. So in Path B, area weighting is only permitted by elevation, north, south, east, west, or whole building.
So if I understand the question is, in Path B, can you trade off against all elevations or just select elevations?
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's what he's trying to ask is when you're doing the
great.
weighting, it's the entire building that you're dealing with and not specific elevations, correct?
Correct. Correct. It's fenestration elements of the same type that you're trading off, but they can be on all elevations. So for example, the windows on the north, south, west, east faces, you could trade those off. You could not trade off an opaque door with a window, and you couldn't include the opaque door in your calculation for windows.
Okay, when you say same product type though, if you're doing averaging, would you include sliding glass doors, for example, or folding glass doors?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
great question. You certainly could.
Okay, so all of those products are averaged against one another.
Because they're regulated by the same U value.
Okay, yeah, okay, good. Okay, good. Do we have another one or is that the same one? We have another one. Let's see here. So Matt is asking, I have a question regarding how is the qualified professional conducting review to meet the intent of a pathway A or B from prior slide. This would be products that could be potentially imported from overseas. Is a professional NFRC accredited modeler or registered professional required?
Great question. So let's go back to that slide. So if you're meeting path A, which is 95% of projects, then your products are labeled and meeting the U values. And the inspector is able to verify that on site. If you're meeting path B and you have products with an averaging, you're averaging the U value, in that case, the professional does need to have experience simulating fenestration products. To be clear, I've probably looked at maybe 20 simulation reports, and they were almost all, probably 18 of them, were done by one simulator locally that was NFRC trained. Now, if you're going path C and you've got products that are unlabeled because they're not able to be labeled. These are not unlabeled products that are simply unlabeled. They're unlabeled because they're not able to be labeled under that labeling scheme. In that case, there is a requirement that the professional, yes, have a training in Windows simulation. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
So before we carry on, I have a question about Path B as well. In the past, it was my experience that if all of the products are certified and labeled, the manufacturer could do an averaging calculation, and it was a spreadsheet actually that came out of the City of Vancouver, and supply that as a compliance pathway without going to a professional sign off on that. Now, it doesn't sound like that's still the case, but I'm wondering if that is a viable alternative where all the products are certified by a third-party certification program. The manufacturer simply calculates out the averaging and is able to reach the target. Would that be acceptable?
Certainly, and the distinction here is looking at labeled versus unlabeled products. Right.
Okay.
So when you're looking at unlabeled products, the intent of having the professional involved is to have some sort of accountability to verify these different systems. However, the city is open to looking at, if it's verified by a manufacturer and arrives on site labeled with the area weighting calculations, that's certainly something that we're open to.
Okay, great, thanks.
So that could be a takeaway for us to ensure that that's maintained. I think it was reasonable that it existed before, and I believe it's an oversight in that it's not outlined as an option now. If the products comes from the factory label, we should be able to accept documentation from the manufacturer that averages them.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks.
So that's something Brandon's going to look into. Code committee meets twice a month. They have a meeting later this month. We'll bring that to code committee. Okay.
Just a follow up from Matt, and Matt, sorry, I knew it was you from QAI, but I missed that. So a question was geared towards if compliance is required by registered professional engineer, or if competence in modeling and window fabrication is more appropriate. Example, would accreditation be sufficient for window energy performance?
I think what the question is, QAI is a test lab and they have qualified simulators. So would a report from QAI or another lab that has, trained accredited simulators, would a report from them be acceptable? I believe the question would be then appropriate to Path C, which is unlabeled products, perhaps imported products or site-glazed products that need to demonstrate their compliance.
Yeah.
And Matt has confirmed here that that is the intent of his question.
Right. So rather than a manufacturer going through a professional engineer, for example, they could work with a lab that has accredited modelers to do this work and provide that information as a compliance path.
So that's the question. That's the question. Right now, I think the city's bylaw, I'm not sure if it allows for that.
Yeah, so I think this kind of comes back, it's similar to the last one. So it's, if that's done in a laboratory setting and it's verified, this would be something that would be allowed as long as there's a way to have when the products arrive on site in a labeled condition or something that goes with it, then that would likely be accepted. We can look into that with the code committee meeting. But again, what we're trying to kind of avoid is unlabeled products arriving to site. So as long as that could be kind of maintained, I think the intent there would be that this would be accepted.
And secondly, if the question was around unlabeled products, we could also look at it for a representative from a recognized certifier. The thing we want to avoid, because we do get this a couple of times a year, where we get a letter from the manufacturer, usually a very small manufacturer I haven't heard of, which sort of states the products meet the U value intended, but doesn't provide the City of Vancouver the surety or the ability to offload the risk of non-performance. So if the question is around unlabeled products and a certifier doing that work, we're happy to take that to code committee. That seems like a reasonable approach and could give the city some certainty around the performance.
It would probably make sense, Chris, don't you think, for the report to be perhaps of the same format as the registered professionals report?
Yes.
But provided by an accredited testing organization.
Yes. Yeah, that logically makes sense to me. and we can take that to code committee later this month and get you a firm answer.
Yeah, Matt, it might make sense to engage the city directly on sort of the details of, how that could look. But, one of the things the bylaw currently has is very clear requirements about those reports. The 2-page bulletin just summarizes the requirements, but the language in the bylaw is quite detailed about the various compliance paths. So I think it would be necessary to review the language in the bylaw, because the detailed provisions were there to address problems that previously existed before they became as detailed as they are. So
Certainly.
Okay. No outstanding questions right now. So we're just gonna, one just popped up. George Nickel asking, how does NAFS figure into unlabeled products besides energy compliance products also need to be compliant with NAFS? Certainly true, sort of outside the scope of this conversation, but I believe that the City of Vancouver is also pretty effective on its NAFS enforcement policies. Would that be correct, Chris?
Yeah. And we have seen products that are unlabeled for energy, but have their NAFS testing. So that's one situation where the NAFS were quite able to enforce upon, but the energy just requires an additional step. We have also come across the case where there is no NAFS testing, and that's a more challenging scenario. Most of the time, it's a case where they don't have their energy testing and they don't have their NAFS testing. And it's a red flag for the city, and we usually focus our enforcement then to ensure that the products are meeting all the minimum requirements. And if they're not, we require they be removed from site. Does that answer the question?
Yep, I think so, yeah. Okay. So no outstanding questions. We're going to bring up the bulletin now, and I'm going to ask Al to kind of take us through the process that he did to develop this this bulletin. So I'm just going to grab that.
maybe zoom out a bit, Terry.
Better?
So yes, so at the time that we were approached to assist with the development of this bulletin, there did not exist a single clear document like this, at the city. What we were provided with is a document of 30 to 50 pages in length, which summarized various targeted changes from the 2018 and 2019 editions of the Vancouver building bylaw, targeted changes to increase the energy performance of buildings. So they were documents that said in this section, this clause, this article is to be deleted, replace it with this one. It was that kind of a language. These were sort of targeted interventions. So the process we went through then was to using that document, going through the bylaw and going through and mapping each one of those changes and marking up a new PDF document of the code with those changes to be clear that we understood the full scope of the changes and what applied where. There was also different terminology that was, the terminology in the code was slightly different than the terminology you see in this bulletin. So, what is the prescriptive path and the performance path? Those terms did not appear in the code language that we were looking at. So, we began by just trying to put together, in effect, our own version of a modified bylaw document that included all the changes, so that we could understand them and look for a simpler way to present them. We based it around the format of a table that we had already seen previously from the city. So which had a good structure to it to begin with. And so we began to populate a new table with the requirements. And then city staff reviewed that, and we went through several iterations of reviewing it with them where some of the terminology was changed, for example, to accord with how the city wanted to present this to the Part 9 construction industry. And so this was kind of an iterative, collaborative process with the city to essentially take, sort of a complex set of documents to work with and translate them into a user-friendly, clear chart. Really, it's basically the values are all on one page to just make it clear to Part 9 code users what the expectations were. And of course, as the city, has educated on this, so now it's clear we have a prescriptive path and a performance path, and essentially two sets of U values that would apply to the most fenestration products: windows, glazed sliding doors, folding doors, curtain walls, window walls. So essentially, all of those, you might say, residentially applicable products have the same U factors, but there were still some building types under Part 9 that could have storefront glazing, doors and windows with fire resistance ratings, and other things that needed to be captured and which are summarized under the other fenestration types and closures section of this document. Because there are several paths that allow for averaging and area weighting, even, for example, under the if you're looking at that prescriptive path where we see 1.04 U value average, that's a really low U factor, but it's for buildings with really high window to wall ratios, or with particular or very large dwellings. And so as the area of glass increases, basically the city wants to make sure that to limit the heat loss through these larger glass areas or larger buildings with much more glass than you would normally have in a Part 9 building, that those U factors have to come down. And now, because of the various sizes and the different products that are involved, they're allowing averaging. And so we needed to really make people aware at a high level what those averaging pathways were. So Terry, if you could scroll to the second page. We summarized the three compliance paths there: the prescriptive U value compliance by labeling, compliance path B, you have labeled product, but you are using area weighted averaging. So some of your labeled products might be higher than 1.4, 1.22, or higher than 1.04. But if you have compensating labeled products that you could offset in an area weighting, then a simplified area weighting table approach is permitted. And this is the approach that we've been discussing with the first, one of the questions we had earlier, can you use a spreadsheet to do that area weighted averaging? That's, the spreadsheet was a permissible approach with labeled products previously in the bylaw, and, Chris and Brandon have confirmed that will be available going forward. And then compliance path C is the one that is that covers for site glazed windows, imported windows, curtain walls, products that do not have labels and or are not normally labeled. And so we've summarized them here, but if you're going to use any of the paths B or C, it's really important to consult the actual language in the bylaw regarding those pathways in order to make sure that you understand what's required, because normally compliance path C in the past required registered professionals to be responsible for those simulations and to submit reports with their seal. And today we've learned that potentially, it might be possible for recognized test labs, testing organizations to also prepare these kinds of reports. So those have been, the language for those compliance path B and C is already in the bylaw. It's been there for a couple of years. And of course, it needs to be consulted for anyone that will want to pursue those paths. So that's really the scope of our involvement, was to really try to decode what the city wanted, try to present it in a simple way as possible, and done collaboratively with the city. And we were pleased to assist in this project, and are happy that it's moving along.
Thanks, Al. Another questions come in, anonymous this time. So prescriptive path, whether or not you're relying on labels from path A, for example, or averaging in path B, the maximum U value is 1.22 if it's not a large ratio or dwelling. So you guys get that? So if you're in the prescriptive path, most buildings, 1.22 is the requirement. If you're
and that's buildings with a window to wall ratio up to 30%.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And maybe that, you could potentially, that could be added, but once the window to wall ratio goes higher than 30%, or the building conditioned area is higher than 325 square meters, then that prescriptive U value drops.
Right. So 1.22 prescriptive, unless you get into the performance path where you can go 1.44 if there's other offsets in the building that gets the project to the appropriate energy use levels, et cetera. Right?
Correct.
And maybe, Brandon, you could clarify, the performance path is not something that a window supplier could trigger, is it?
No, that's involving the energy modeling and the designs. That's earlier on in the process.
So in other words, it's the builder or the architect.
It's the builder's responsibility to choose which pathway that they're going to be going forward with.
Yeah. So if they're already on, if they are going to qualify under that path, they can ask for higher U factors than the prescriptive path.
And maybe a scenario is a better way to explain that. So if a builder is, knows they're going to hit targets around the 1 air change per hour, and they have increased thickness of walls or roof areas, those sorts of assemblies, and they want to use a specialty window that does not hit 1.22, and it's in the 1.3, 1.4 early 4s range, then this is the path that they would choose to do that.
And is that decision made, at permit stage? Do they have to declare that that's the route they're going at that point?
It is.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to stop that.
Another question has popped up.
Okay. Is compliance path C applicable to imported finished goods or imported components locally assembled?
Both. So like site glazed assemblies would be the latter, but then imported assemblies as well.
Okay.
There was also a question earlier about prescriptive requirements for entry door. As of January 3rd, 2022, is it consistent with current performance criteria? It does outline entry doors, but I thought I'd give you guys a chance to talk a bit more about that.
It does, and it's going to stay similar to the current iteration of the code, which allows variations for the entry door based on aesthetic concerns, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to expand on that, on the swing door topic a little bit. So entry doors with or without glazing follow the provincial values of 1.80, correct?
Yes.
Are entry doors part of an averaging path? That would not be the case, right? You don't include entry doors if you're averaging other products.
Correct. Yeah, entry doors are standalone.
And then exterior doors and windows that require fire ratings are exempt. And then the main entry door has always been a bit of a topic of confusion for a lot of suppliers. It is quote unquote exempt, but it does require some prescriptive attributes, correct? Such as argon, dual glazing, low E coatings. Now, what I did notice, unfortunately, after this was that the text for that says, let me just grab it here, thermally broken metal or wood with multiple panes of glass, which may be argon filled or coated with a low E coating. That's, to me, that's a bit vague on, is the glazing dual pane at a minimum with argon and low E coatings?
Question, perhaps it's something we can work with
Yeah.
Fenestration Canada to refine that language to be more clear. If we can work with you, Terry, or someone at Fenestration Canada to refine the language, we'll edit that before the end of the year.
Okay, great.
Was it the intent for those doors to comply with the energy efficiency standards regulation?
I don't.
The intent is that those doors are taking reasonable steps to improve energy efficiency using widely available approaches and techniques.
Yeah, and I believe in the Energy Act that the text is similar to that, where it's dual glazed with, you know, warm edge spacer, et cetera, something like that. So yeah, we can look at tidying that up a little bit, because it does, you know, it's a little bit vague to me still, and unfortunately I didn't catch that before we published. So okay, so we're going to we do have some questions. So entry door requirement is 1.8 metric. Conversion to IP equates to 0.316998. Does it mean that a 0.32 is acceptable?
I need you to
I
repeat
understand.
that so I can think it through, please.
Is there a way we could share that?
I can, yeah, one sec here. Just let me just move this.
Chris, Brandon, it's a question mostly about rounding practices for the VVBL.
Yeah, so you can see here, entry door requirement is 1.80 metric for a typical swing door. Conversion to IP takes it to a 0.316998. So imperial value would be a 0.32. And to me, that sounds logical.
Yeah, we can look into that to clarify. My concern is if you convert 0.32 the other direction, how high up you are to above 1.8, but we can look into that and provide some clarity.
Okay.
I actually have a question for you guys. Does this new requirements also take on non-conditioned space as well? Is it the entire building, or is it just conditioned space that we're talking about? Good.
Just conditioned space.
Yeah. Dave's asking where you can get the bulletin, and I believe the bulletin is being sent out from Fenestration Canada to all members, either now or it might have already gone out, Dave. I think I saw it actually. And then another comment to that, to the swing door U value, it says it converts the other way to a 1.817004 if you use 0.32. So that the averaging or the conversion is a bit, you know, challenging, because if you take it one direction, it works. You take it the other direction, it doesn't. So needs maybe a little work on that.
Yeah, and we'll clarify it. And thanks for doing that conversion. That points exactly to the kind of concern in doing that.
Okay. Okay, so good. I'm just going to carry on here. A couple of questions that I'll also bring back at the end, but I want to keep going here. So I can actually, thinking back, in the City of Vancouver's efforts and their work with the fenestration world, I've always been impressed. So I remember working way back when this first began. It was Mark Hartman actually at the City of Vancouver that worked on the process, and right from the start, they were taking great steps to engage the fenestration industry. We're so pleased that to remain active in those efforts. And since those early days, we've seen a great deal of success in the changing landscape of high performance fenestration products installed in Vancouver homes. There were local manufacturers that were paying attention in these early discussions and proactively launched design and development programs to supply products into what was relatively a small market at the time. And I'm so pleased to have both Kyle and Adrian here. And I was hoping that they could maybe share, a little bit about their company's, path and foresight, when the City of Vancouver's targets first started with 1.44 and how that's impacted their development and the speed of development of these products. So if I could ask you guys, I'll just start with Kyle, maybe just kind of share a little bit about Westeck's, thought and process with high performance products, particularly in the City of Vancouver. Can't hear you, Kyle. Nope. Technology. There you go. Move a little closer where it's hard to hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks. So I think Westeck is for the most part, and for many years, always tried to push the envelope in thermal performance. And not only thermal performance, but product offerings, size of products, and those sorts of things to kind of put us aside from other competitors in the marketplace. So I think with some of the foresight of the new thermal codes coming in, whether it be in Vancouver or in BC in general, it was a decision that we made years and years ago to try to be on the front end of this. And it also helps to have management and ownership fully understand how the market is moving and understanding that it's not going away for good reason, of course. So we try to put ourselves in the front foot, and that leads to early design of products, and it leads to us being prepared for these code changes and heightened targets. So just as an example, over the past few years, we've launched 3 new lines for both windows and sliding doors, lift and slide doors, and such like that, all with a thought process of targeting the City of Vancouver, essentially, and the rest will follow. So it's not poor logic to think about thermal performance in such a way. If you're up to the targets of Vancouver, then you're good to go in Canada for the most part and across the board. So I think essentially we had all of our product lines for the most part set, ready to go, even in mid 2020. So we're a little bit ahead of it, which is good. And we're kind of hoping that with the information coming out from Fenestration Canada, City of Vancouver, all the associations climbing on board as well, that we're finally going to be realizing our hard work and investment to start paying back and being able to provide the City of Vancouver and surrounding municipalities with high performance products. And it's not to say that we are done by any means, simply because we have a 1.22 and greater. So there's always ways to make improvements, whether that's from air tightness point of view, to tighten up our supply chain, to help alleviate the costs that come with a marketplace push product. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're available. We're able to provide these products. We're looking at ways to bring our costs down and maybe align our costs with some of our competitors as well.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So Adrian, I know that you guys have been active, like really active lately. I'm just wondering, how early in the game Innotech was doing high performance products, and did the City of Vancouver's activities, speed up that process?
There are people in our company that probably will be able to speak to the details of that history better. Funny enough, Al probably could speak to it better since he was in the earlier days of Innotech. From my perspective, Innotech has always set a bar of durability and high performance. That's been kind of our cornerstone right from the get-go. So that fight for getting the energy value, the air tightness, and the overall product livability was always the goal. We've been having a lot of fun, I think, trying to push that envelope a bit further down the road. And certainly Vancouver helps us make that possible. The reality of these kind of things, like the VBBL really pushing the envelope, is it helps move the entire market to ask that question of what else can I do with the windows? I think it's the piece that I'm really excited about personally is we're starting to play with these homes that are getting tighter and more energy efficient. The windows have become increasingly important. It's like we used to have this really big target and we were just throwing darts at the board and it doesn't really matter what happens. You just got to hit the board. Just don't get off the board. But as we get closer to net zero and as we get further down the passive house type of criteria, we now need to hit the bullseye every time. Like we need to just get so much more precise about what we're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this really drives us from we're right now, it feels like what we're really talking about is the transition from double glazed to triple glazed. If that becomes just a very clear criteria of our performance in the future. But the stuff that really excites me is once we get to triple glaze, there are some innovations that get us just a little bit further, but we really have to make a major jump in glass in order to make the next improvement to the buildings. We don't have to talk about that now, but it is kind of the transition in my head when we start thinking about how do we get past where we currently are.
Yeah, I do want to touch on what you mentioned though. The City of Vancouver has been doing this now for quite a number of years, where they've had much more aggressive thermal performance targets than Metro Vancouver around them. But we're seeing that change as well. Jurisdictions like West Vancouver pushing into step 5 for some projects. North Van, I know, is going that direction. I heard Richmond, there's chatter there that they're going to be driving their numbers down. And like you say, this is pushing to triple glazing. Like that's, it's as simple as that. You're triple glazing or you're not in the game. What does that mean for your companies? Are you guys ready? The product might be, but are you ready to deal with triple glaze? Larger products, just supply chain problems. Where do you guys stand on being ready for triple glazing being the norm rather than the exception?
So personally, we've kind of gotten to this place where, because of the niche we're playing in, because we've been playing here for so long, so much of the standard of our windows going triple glazed already. Like I would say that's kind of the standard in our supply market. Like a good example, we just launched our 88 PHXI, and we launched our 88 PH Plus group about a year ago, and we've gotten certification with our new passive house system, which I am just ecstatic about. That is anybody that's gotten deep enough down that rabbit hole knows that is not a hole that's easy to fit down. No. And that product is all triple glazed. We don't sell that product double glazed because there's no value in that. We can't go further if we're going to do double glazed in our system. So I think we're even gearing up in that way, that we're kind of eliminating double glaze as part of our options, because what's the point if we're going to fight this battle to net zero?
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, what about you guys? Is triple, you're headed there. What does that pose for you guys? I know that Westeck makes their own sealed units currently. Is that something that's going to be, available, directly out of Westeck, or are you going to have to farm that out, or what does that look like for you guys?
Will be something available out of Westeck, and I think Adrian's correct, and as we all know it, I can see Chris nodding his head. Triple glaze will be the next step, and then that will kind of be the standing point for everyone else. We do have some products that will get us to our 1.22 without going to triple glaze, but not all of them. So you may be able to supply a double glaze patio door, for instance, with some foam fills and that sort of thing, but when you factor in maybe the acoustical benefits of a triple glaze opposed to a double glazed unit, it's starting to make a little bit more sense to do so. So we are set up for triple glazing across the board in all of our products, but some of them that even with triple glaze may still not meet in Vancouver. So there's going to be some product lines that simply are not going to go, and maybe not worth the investment for us to try to make them go.
Right.
So triple glaze is going to be happening more and more, obviously available in double glaze in some areas, but with that becomes a little
Triple's
bit
the way of the future for sure.
Yeah.
And the future is here for a lot of guys.
And I think that maybe if you think about the cost increase between a double and a triple glaze and the perception of it being more, of course, more material, more expensive to go from double to triple, if you want to maintain that double glaze unit, what is the cost of the other materials that need to go into the product? Foam fills, fiberglass, aerogels, additional low-E coatings, and what have you. So the cost may be similar, but keeping it to a single low-E coating on a triple glaze may be more effective and efficient for a manufacturer to do, as opposed to a double glaze with all these extra bells and whistles to try to get it there. So much simpler of a product line to produce.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll open it up to any questions here as we get close to the end. Raymond says, has there been any comfort factor scale being considered? From my perspective, I think that that's becoming a bigger conversation from fenestration suppliers that are in the high performance world, that they can sell a lot of that comfort factor. And I think the smart ones are not only pitching energy savings, but are really going after that comfort aspect. Anybody else have any thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great comment, and the amount of discussion going around thermal performance, I think it's great for a manufacturer and for the homeowners and builders and the end consumer to be more informed about what they're getting. It's maybe a disservice to simply talk about a U value in some cases, when you need to be concerning yourself as well with solar heat gain and all of those. And then along with that comes the comfort. So I think that the more informed we can be as a manufacturer and as an end user, the better everyone is, because there's so many options out there. And you can really start selecting what you would like and selecting the right product for the right area of your home as well. Perhaps not every window around the home needs to be X or Y.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
With the amount of information and with the associations and these webinars as well, much more of a knowledgeable client base that we're seeing here for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
George, I'm just going to really quickly here, Adrian. So George jumped in because he wanted to make sure that we got the info straight. Innotech was ahead of the City of Vancouver targets in the early 2000s, and further, Seattle City Lights program was ahead of CLV for a while and a better market for performance products. Things have changed. Now Vancouver is ahead of the rest of North America, and triple glazing has been a part of Innotech's product lines from the early 2000s. So thanks for straightening me out there, George. Appreciate it. Okay, another question.
I'm hoping to just build a short, just real brief on Kyle's comments. I made the comments about, us hitting that bullseye. I think as window manufacturers, that's something that we're certainly running into, is the level of comfort in somebody's home and choices that they're making with fenestration. That has become a lot more particular. Like, it's now our job in Greece to make sure that the choices are being given, and really the home is being much more considerate. You're having to be a lot more considerate of people's homes and how they're going to interact and where things belong and the sizing and operation. I think we've gotten into a place where the responsibility, because the details are so much finer, that we have to really lean into that conversation in order to give customers what they need at this level. Yeah. Again, the target used to be so much bigger, so it didn't really matter where the dart went. But all of us have to lean into this at every stage of it in order for the customers to get what they need at the high performance level.
So Raymond added to his comment about comfort, comment with respect to high solar heat gain in the passive house. I wasn't going to open up the solar heat gain can of worms, but Raymond, if you've raised it, so I can blame it on you. I was going to ask Chris and Brandon if there was any if there was any discussion or thoughts about the City of Vancouver, looking at regulating solar heat gain, because, everybody here in Southern BC, knows that it's a challenge, and there's, lots of discussion going on about it. I'm just wondering, in the city, if there's any thoughts happening there.
There are, and there's some internal discussions that are going on regarding that as well. It won't be part of this 2022 VBL update, but we are looking at it as a potential integration for future revisions and code changes.
Okay.
And if Fenestration Canada has a position or how they would like to see Vancouver move forward on solar heat gain and overheating issues, we'd welcome it. We've put the ask out. We have had one manufacturer come back with feedback, but it would be great to have solar heat gain either regulation or requirements that are developed by industry with that knowledge and experience. So we'd welcome that. And if there's a modest sum of money that would be helpful in putting together like a small position paper, certainly happy to fund that. Thank you.
That's great to hear, because there is a lot of discussion about it and a lot of concern about where the use of solar heat gain is potentially problematic. Justin added to that, to the comment about the solar heat gain, et cetera, and the comfort was, especially as it's being related to TEDI and the step code targets, requests for higher solar heat gains with lower U values, comfort issues can arise, and curious on everyone's thoughts. Justin, I think that for the most part, everybody is in complete agreement that it is a challenge, and we're facing some difficulties in how solar heat gain is used in high performance buildings. So it's a big topic. We don't have time for it today. I'm sure that we will be talking about it more. Actually, I know we will be. It is a topic of conversation for the BC regional presentation coming up in the first week of October for regional week. So there will be a lot more discussion about it coming along, and we'll definitely be reaching out to everybody that has opinions to make sure that we figure it out, as well as we can. So,
Just
okay.
one more comment in the Q&A about that.
Thanks,
Jared.
Al. Yeah, passive solar gain. So again, from George, passive solar gain seems to be a driving factor for MERBs using TEDI modeling. Overheating will be a big issue. Could not agree more, George. I completely agree, and I think that anybody living in British Columbia that understands the challenge probably agrees. The argument gets a little more difficult as you go over the Rocky Mountains, but there are challenges with it there as well. I've heard discussions about Energy Star for new homes in the Ontario region that we're facing challenges with overheating because guys are using high solar gain products. So it is a challenge, and we're gonna figure it out at some point. Okay, the old clock on the wall is getting pretty close to the end of the line here. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you guys for participating. Really appreciate your input, and Chris and Brandon. We absolutely love working with the City of Vancouver. We like what you're doing, and we particularly like that you engage the industry and listen, take our advice and our suggestions and our participation with you to help the industry understand where you're going and how it impacts our industry. So I want to thank you guys for your time. I'd like to thank Roto as our sponsor for this session. Roto Hardware has always been a great sponsor for Fenestration Canada events, and I want to thank for that. I want to thank Al for putting me out on my first Tech Talks, and it's probably not my last, but it's not going to be my standard gig. I can tell you that right now. So thanks a bunch, guys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
We
thank
definitely
you.
appreciate the leadership, both from Fenestration Canada and your members. It makes it much easier to push for higher performance products when there are companies that are forging ahead and pushing towards the future with higher performing products. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're proud in BC in particular to be leading that charge with a lot of companies that are on board developing high performance products. So there's a good future for it, for sure. All right, I think we're done. So thank you very much, guys, and thanks to everybody that listened in. Hopefully it was informative, and we'll catch you next time with Al Jaugelis on Tech Talks. All right.
You are a member and want to be part of the live recording of Tech Talks? Easy. Visit fenestrationcanada.ca and sign up for the next show.